I made this mammoth 3-tier gravity defying cake that was set up to celebrate a milestone illustrious 60th birthday. Surprisingly, this was my very first attempt at not just a gravity defying cake but a tiered one, and for a first attempt at anything, especially for a tiered cake, there were some challenges. In this video, I'm going to be taking you through the entire process of making this cake, discussing the mindset behind the concept and the challenges I faced representing the concept in cake form, as well as how I got through it all. Hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have yourself a detailed view of the process of making a cake like this, plus some helpful tips to help you navigate your own cake decorating with confidence. This is going to be fun, so grab yourself a cup of tea and a notepad and let's get started. So let me just set this up before we start, right? This cake was ordered by an acquaintance of mine who is an event organizer and a decorator. When she requires a cake, she would normally call me with a budget and leaves me to do whatever I wanted. However, this time was slightly different. I was recovering from a very emotionally draining experience, which had made it really difficult for me to derive a concept for this cake. Now, why is this relevant? I present this story to show that some of the challenges of cake decorating isn't in the making of the cake process itself, but issues may arise from one's mental state, which may also affect one's outcomes. Cake decorating is, after all, an art, hence the state of one's mind isn't to be discounted. But aiming for the best outcome for this cake, I headed straight to B&Q for some MDF board, which, for my luck, I couldn't find the right size. I picked up a larger size to be cut in shop using the wood cutting service, but unfortunately the wood cutter was out of service on the day. I had no option but to hire an extra hand literally to saw my 16-inch square board. My very dutiful hand also had to cut my threaded rod to the height of the cake, and the details are on screen for your convenience. After what seemed like the hardest part of the tasks, I drilled a hole in the middle of the board to hold the threaded rod, and the name of the drill attachment is on screen for you. You could pick this up on Amazon or your nearby hardware or tool store. Now, if you wonder why I opted for an MDF board instead of a regular cake board, the simple reason is to ensure that the cake was set on a steady, unshakable surface because the cake was going to be very heavy. You could also settle for hardwood, but this would have to be treated to be food safe. So the laminate MDF board seemed like a convenient choice. With hindsight of my experience, I suggest you purchase this kind of board from a cake decorating outlet, which will eliminate having to cut your board to shape. Outlets such as Cake Decorating Company will have the sizes pre-cut for your convenience. And by the way, this video is not sponsored. I'm just giving you helpful information to help you get the best out of this experience because I didn't know better. I've left some more information and links in the description box for your convenience. After drilling a hole in the middle of the board, I set the ball with feet using hot glue, and to make the board completely food safe, I wrapped the entire surface in contact paper, sealing off the cut part of the wood too. With the board covered and feet set, it's time for the threaded rod to be set in place. A few tips to notice to ensure that the drilled hole is the same diameter as the rod, and I'll link an in-depth tutorial by another cake maker, Scrumptious Cakes by Fairy, who explains this process better and names the tools better. First, a washer was set over the board and a nut sits on top of that. A spanner is used to tighten this on the top and on the bottom parts, but I'm sure there's a better way of doing this. However, the new skills required to get this cake board done and steady worked, and I'm pleased with my results. The entire process made me so anxious I felt like I was going to be losing my mind or a finger of some sort, but with my fingers all intact, the board was set aside and work starts on the cake. Our cakes are a 10-inch base tier, a 7-inch mid-tier and a 6-inch top tier. These were baked 24 hours earlier and left to settle the crumb, making it easier to work with. A soft and delicate crumb will crumble easily, which is a risk to avoid in cake decorating. All the cakes are to be leveled and sliced into layers, which will be filled with buttercream, stacked together before covering in ganache. I have detailed tutorials on the subject of leveling, which I cover in many of my cake decorating videos, some of which are linked in the description box for you. I'm aiming to set the height of the cakes against dummy cakes, which I use here as a guide whilst leveling, and I'll be explaining this in more detail as the process develops. After leveling, the cakes are to be filled and layered. The 10-inch cake is first to be filled with French buttercream and toffee caramel. For all the cakes, there is a base board set on top of another board using ganache. The larger board serves as a work surface. The grease-proof paper is then glued onto the base board using ganache, and ganache again is applied before the first layer of cake is placed. To achieve a level cake so the cake is stacked perfectly as a 3-tier cake top forward, I am using the double board method similar to using ganache discs, and I have in-depth tutorials using the same technique for other cakes linked below for you, one of which is linked up here for your convenience. Whilst filling the cakes though, each cake is measured against the height of its dummy cake version. The reason for this is a little more difficult to explain in words, but I'll be showing you as the process develops. After filling and layering all 3 cakes, they were left to chill and were brought back to be trimmed for a clean slice when the cake is cut into. For this cake though, trimming helps to even out the cake surface for a more polished look. I love to trim my cakes, but I should add it's not necessary to trim all cakes. While trimming, I occasionally measure the height of each cake against each dummy version to ensure the cake matches the dummy. I do this to ensure the purpose for which the dummy is used will aid an evenly formed cake when the cake is finally complete, but as noted earlier, the use of the cake dummies will make sense in a moment. In the meantime, here is something that could make sense easily. My name is Gladys, and over here I make simple, informative tutorials to help you navigate cake decorating easily, like this one, even though I am not making sense right now. So if you're new here, hello and welcome, and if you've been here before, hello again and welcome back. It's a pleasure to have you, and we are growing, which I am excited about. So whilst you're here, do consider subscribing to the channel, hit the notification bell to be notified of future videos such as this and more, and do engage with the content by hitting the like button or even dislike button, and maybe leave a comment too. Tell me what you think, what you would like to see, and suggestions for future videos, and I'll do well to adhere to that. And oh, don't forget to share this video. Tell someone I am not making sense right now if you have to. With all that said, the cakes are now trimmed and done, and we are just about to make sense shortly. Off to the next. Now to the part that makes sense. The dummy cakes were each set against the real cakes, just so the real cakes were almost the same size as the dummy. This meant I could cut parts of the dummy cake to fill into a part of the real cake to make a perfectly formed round cake. This is important for the stability of the cake because as the cake is going to be facing forward, I needed a solid base for each cake to take on the towering weight of the cake above without the cake collapsing. Over here, I have measured each dummy cake and cut the portion I need to fill into the real cake. This is then made food safe by sealing off the section that comes into direct contact with the cake. I do this by covering that part with a cake card measured against the surface. This is then attached using solid white chocolate before the styrofoam is wrapped in cling film. With knowledge of having done this now, I will consider using a foil tape to wrap the styrofoam if I were to do this again. With the dummy cake portions all sorted, I have also pre-drilled holes in each, which will be helpful for later. Our fake cake slices were left to set first, and back on my work table, the fake slices measured against the real cake and unequal slices cut out. Over here there's a slight mistake, but this is quickly fixed before the fake cake is set in place. This is done for all 3 cakes before they are all covered in ganache. I'm using the double board method similar to using ganache discs for even sharp cake edges, a technique I have employed for some of my other cakes in the past and in one of my most recent tutorials linked up here for your convenience. All 3 cakes are crumb coated in a plain layer of white chocolate ganache followed by a second layer of grey. The color brief for this cake is burgundy and silver. Using ganache for a cake like this will assist stability, as I wouldn't trust a buttercream finish for a cake like this. A fondant finish though would add an added layer of work, which I was rather keen to avoid. With crumb coating done, the cakes were left to set first and returned again for more layers of ganache. And the ratio of chocolate to cream for the ganache was 4:1. This meant I had a solid layer of ganache to assist the stability of the cake, but as the process develops, you'll see how that created a slight problem with the finish of the cake. With the cake half polished, the top board is removed from each cake and the surface is cleaned out first using a knife to cut out any excess hanging ganache, followed by a scraper aiming for a clean and level surface. This part of the cake is going to be front facing, meaning it has to be clean and polished, a process that is repeated for all 3 cakes. Next, the same color ganache is to be used to cover the top, but as you can see here, the ganache is rather runny, hence I left the ganache over the cakes to set first, and the cakes brought back to be scraped clean, and an extra coating of grey and white colored ganache is applied sparingly to all 3 cakes before that too is scraped out. One of the challenges I found with making a cake like this for the first time was that I struggled to find an in-depth tutorial to cover all aspects of the cake making process, so I'm hoping this video proves useful for you. With the top surface all complete, the cakes were turned upside down and the bottom board removed before employing the same processes as before to achieve a clean polished surface. With both top and bottom surfaces clean and sharp, the cakes were left to set in the fridge before the next step. The moment of truth is here, and with all the 3 tiers of cake left to chill and set completely, it's time to tear the cake on our metal cake structure. But first, there's a crack from the solid ganache that needs fixing, and sadly, this was the part where the camera died and I was too busy with the cake to notice. Nonetheless, I trust you derived a lot of value and lessons from the entire process. The added decorations to the cake included edible silver leaf and stenciling detail to complete the look. Transporting this cake on a foggy winter's day on a bumpy road to a place I've never been and hours away from home wasn't child's play. But the cake turned out a masterpiece, especially with the acrylic floating stand. There are some more videos on the channel for you to watch, including some vlog style ones taking you behind the scenes of a baking day for me. And I'll see you in my next video. Thanks for watching.